All right. So this video is intended to go along with the reading The Abolition of White Democracy, the excerpts from the chapters, the introduction, chapter 1 of The Abolition of White Democracy. This is going to be one of two parts of the YouTube video. So 3 total YouTube videos in addition to the Know Your Rights video. But this will be parts 1 and 2. This one is going to focus on whiteness, the history of race and whiteness in the United States. The next video is going to focus on blackness. All right. So when we talk about it, right, first Africans arrived in Jamestown in 1619. Okay? And we kind of have a different place, or there's a different conception of these Africans when they first arrived compared to how we think of the way black folks were going to be treated in the early 1800s, for example. All right. What we do know is they possess some rights similar to other Virginians, right? Some were free, some were enslaved, some had property, right? They definitely had the rights to travel and move around. It was a very different type of society, right? If you did some of the Howard Zinn reading, one of the things you probably picked up on was how poor the country was and how much land was really divided, right? Most of the European immigrants that are coming over actually come over as indentured servants. The majority come over as indentured servants. And so what you have is a lot of these folks working side by side with the Africans. Usually you would work for 7 to 10 years to come over here from Europe, right? And so what you would have is these folks working side by side along with the Africans, right? And over time you had a fair amount of revolts that were interracial and were dominated at the colonial hierarchy, right? Perhaps the most famous of these was Bacon's Rebellion in 1672. All right, Bacon's Rebellion was a group of Europeans and Africans. Oh, I bet that's going to be a lot of interference there, a lot of wind noise. Group of Europeans and Africans who got together and rose up in Virginia, ended up sending the colonial government off the mainland out onto boats, and they went around burning, terrorizing, right? After that, we begin to see the creation of the first race laws in the United States, right? And this is, again, beginning in late 1600s through the 1680s, right? 1670s, late 1670s into the 1680s, we see the creation of the first race laws that's limiting the ability of blacks to own property, limiting the ability of blacks to move around, all right? So you really see the creation of this, and the intention is to separate blacks from whites, poor whites from poor blacks, to create this artificial division, right? And so whiteness then historically in this country takes on the mark of citizenship, right? It's not necessarily connotated with any group or any location, right? Any purity of blood, but being recognized as white will grant you citizenship, all right? And so as an example of that, when the Irish got to this country, they were not considered white. Okay, there's a whole book called How the Irish Became White. And in New York and things of that nature, they were segregated from the rest of the white folks. Through years of really anti-black sentiment on the part of the Irish, they joined this group of white folks, right? Germans in early Texas history weren't particularly considered white either, right? And so whiteness historically takes on citizenship, right? Or that's what it means, okay? When you have the passage or the fruition of the Civil Rights Movement, 64, 65, you have the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. With these things, whiteness loses its state sponsorship, right? Now, whiteness still exercises and still works in certain ways throughout our democracy, right? Probably most evident in the criminal justice system, right? However, right, historically, whiteness is going to identify itself as citizenship, all right? So then going back and looking at what race is or is not, right? Through Joel Olson, he lays down 6 things that he says race is not, and we're going to talk about these 6 things and what they are, right? First and foremost, he says that race is not biology, right? And what he means by this is that there is no basis in race, in genetics, in biology, in physical anthropology. There's nothing in the hard sciences that say, okay, human beings are actually distinct racial groups. What this means is that creating race in general implies a certain willful ignorance of physical features, right? So we're going to develop this idea of race based on skin color, right? Not hair color, not eye color, right? There's no genetic reason necessarily to say that one group, such as white folks, is going to be different from another just because they have a certain type of skin or a certain type of hair, okay? Furthermore, the way that we consider races today in the United States doesn't have anything to do with biology. So you could be Latina or Hispanic, for example, be from Argentina, and probably the majority of your heritage and your parents and ancestors, a large amount of that could have come from Spain, right? So we'd say the majority of your blood could be from Spain. However, you'd still be categorized as a Latino. You'd have a lot more in common in your heritage with most of the white folks running around this country than somebody from an indigenous part of Mexico, from Oaxaca or from Chiapas, from southern Mexico, someone from Guatemala, right, whose bloodline is going to be mostly indigenous. You're going to have very completely separate genetic and physical features. And in that case, the Hispanic or the Latina from Argentina is going to be much more similar to a person from this country in genetic makeup. All right. Similarly, obviously, we know that there's a lot of discrepancy and a lot of history in this country where there is no pure Hartley bloodline anymore. Right? If you spend a lot of time in this country, you got mixed up in some way. Right? There is not a lot of biological grounding for this idea of race. Secondly, race is not ethnicity, right? One of these ideas that we have is, oh, well, then race is loosely based around our ethnic makeup, right? But race doesn't, whiteness just tracks from however you appear to look in this country. It doesn't say anything about your ethnicity, right? People don't identify as white in Europe. They identify as Spanish. They identify as German, right? Where does whiteness cover Croatia, for example, right? Countries in Eastern Europe. Those are completely different ethnicities, right, than Western Europe. Mexico itself has 68 different languages spoken within it. Each of those is going to identify as a different nationality, right? So it's ridiculous to say, oh yeah, this idea of Hispanic covers hundreds of different ethnic groups, right? It doesn't track to just continent broad like that. And again, right, to say, oh, it covers ethnic groups from Argentina, well, right, aren't their ancestors there to go back to Spain, right? So race doesn't really track as ethnicity, okay? When we talk about race as a neutral category, right, just as a one aspect in our lives, right, it ignores the historical function of race, right? It ignores the fact that race historically has implied and been citizenship, right? It's not just some neutral category that's always been around. That's not how whiteness really, and not how race has functioned in our history. All right. Next, we got to talk about race as not just your identity. All right. And again, this is something that overnight with the civil rights movement, right, you have whiteness becoming a status of citizenship to just one race amongst many, right? It's like your culture. Like black folks can dance pretty well. They like hip hop music, right? White folks can't dance really well. They watch Friends, right? Black folks watch Empire. Differences of culture, right? And that's not really how it works either, right? Race isn't your identity. It's not your culture, right? That's not the function behind race historically. And obviously, right, there's lots of different cultures within whiteness, blackness, right? To say that, oh, there's an Asian culture in the United States ignores the plurality, right, and diversity within that. Historically, right, whiteness is going to function as being the loss of ethnicity, right? The loss of your culture. So once my family comes here and my parents, right, can no longer speak Italian, right? I can no longer speak Italian. I don't know how to cook any of that homeschool Italian cooking, right? I don't know how to do any of that anymore. Right now, I'm firmly white. I don't have any more of that Italian heritage. If you saw me running around talking with my hands all the time, eating some Italian food, speaking Italian, you'd say, oh, there goes an Italian, right? But when you lose that, then you gain that access to whiteness in this country historically, right? But today to say that, oh yeah, it's just part of your identity. No, that's not what it is, right? That ignores the context of power that has got along with it, ongoing, right? Next, to say that race is a universal phenomenon, is it correct? When we say it's a universal phenomenon, we're talking about something that existed everywhere, all over the world, at all times, as if race has always been a conception of humans, right? Our ideas of race are fundamentally different from Europeans, all right? They don't really think in racial terms like we do at all. Race is not something that exists all over the world, right? There's plenty of examples just on this continent of American Indians taking leaders who were African, for example, or bringing Europeans in to live among them, right? This idea of race or separation of people by races doesn't really have historical precedent, right? So it's unique to our time. However, lastly, Olson is going to say that, look, we can't act like race is a fiction, right? Race has historical implications in our lives, right? Black folks represent 13% of all drug users in this country and 76% of those locked up behind bars. It has real implications, right? Civil rights movement, Civil Rights Act, right, removes discrimination in housing in the mid-'60s. All right. Those red line communities in Houston are right over here in the 3rd Ward. You can drive to those communities and knock on some doors, and I guarantee you will find folks who were denied home loans, right? It has had an impact in our lives, and to act like it doesn't, right, or to act like it's just nonsense, also does it a disservice. So this is the way Olson really talks about whiteness, really talks about our imagination in race and what is the proper way to approach it.